Joining us for Tech Tuesday. Today we're going to talk about some more dangerous cybersecurity threats with some of the cybersecurity team here at UNCP. We're going to start off with Mr. Kevin Pate. We're going to turn everything over to his hands. Thanks again for joining us, Kevin.
Well, hello everybody. Happy Tuesday. Good afternoon. And I hope this will be, I know this will be an informative session for you today. We're excited to talk with you today about our security tools. So that's why we're here. Our goal is to help you to understand why we need protection and to demonstrate and explain how we are protecting UNCP stakeholders. So we're going to talk about all of the tools we're using to keep UNCP as safe as possible from cyber threats. So we'll just start by saying, why do we need security? And so if you see in front of you, this is one of our tools. This is Anomaly. And what you're seeing is what's happening right now. These are all the attempts against UNCP's network that are happening real time. So this is a really interesting tool to show folks what is actually going on. It's eye-opening for most people because when they see this, it just really illustrates what is happening on the security front and why we need to be very vigilant and constantly in protection mode. So without going into any more detail on that tool, just suffice it to say, these are all the places we're under attack from in the world. So it's happening all day, every day, from everywhere. So what are we doing to protect against all of these threats? All right, so we're using a layered security approach. And what does that mean? What does layered security mean? That means that not any one piece of our security is sufficient enough to protect us from all of this that's going on out there. So I'll just talk about the layers of our network. We have tools for protection at the network edge. And that's at the edge of our network. That's where our internet traffic comes and goes. And we have a next generation firewall there. And we'll go into detail on some of these tools in just a few minutes. But I just want to describe the different layers that when we're talking about protection, where we're coming from. So the network edge, that's one layer of defense. We can stop things at the edge of the network. And then we have the internal network. And we have some tools inside that gives us network access control or admittance onto the network. So there's a tool we'll talk about in a minute that determines whether or not you're going to connect to our network and then how you connect. And then we have another tool on the internal piece of our network that examines all of the traffic that goes east, west, inside of campus from one resource to another. So if it's from a computer on your desk to a server in our data center, it never goes out onto the internet. So all of that traffic is visible to us. And then you've got north-south traffic, which is the traffic that goes from your computer out to the internet and back. And so we have a tool that can see all of that traffic. All right, so that's our internal network. Then we have something I would describe as a middle layer of protection. So, you know, when you type your internet address into your browser or you click on a URL, what happens there is that link is translated into an internet number. And there's some protection even at that level. So when you type in an address and you try to go somewhere on the internet, we've got a tool that takes a look and says, is that safe or is that not? Okay, so there's a tool there at the middle layer. Also at the middle layer, we would talk about email traffic. So all of the email traffic is examined and is protected, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So that's the middle layer. So you got the edge, you got the internal network, and then you've got a middle layer. And then we've got what's called the access layer, and that's where your device connects to the network. That's where you access the network. And if you are On a mobile device, you're going to connect using a wireless connection. If you're in an office at your computer that's on your desk, you're probably connecting via a wired connection. But that's where you access the network. And permissions are set depending on who you are and what you are using on our network. And this is at this layer, we can also apply what we call network segmentation, so that no one endpoint can talk to another endpoint directly unless there's permission to do so. Okay, and so that's the fourth layer. And then the last layer we'll talk about is the endpoint. That's your device. That's whatever you're using. So what's happening on the endpoint itself is another layer where protection can be applied. So those are all the different layers. And if we stack all those together and all these tools work together, it provides a program of security. So visibility into what's happening and also knowing what out of that is bad traffic is crucial to being able to identify and stop known threats and new threats. So how in the world do we keep abreast of all of the bad stuff? So we describe to a threat intelligence service called Cisco Talos. And Steve, if you would like, you can just type in Talos and get to the Talos site and just bring that up as I talk about it. Talos, T-A-L-O-S. It's Cisco Systems threat intelligence team of 400 security experts that are watching traffic from around the world. They've got their security solutions deployed, and even from our network, they can see and they have visibility into what's happening all over the globe. And so as they take a look at the traffic, they are examining that traffic, they're analyzing that traffic. They're also working with other intelligence agencies to say, hey, we've got some new stuff out there we're seeing. What are you seeing? And it's their job to interpret what's going on out there and label it as it's good, bad, suspicious, or we don't know yet. And so the benefit of the threat intelligence is that this group of experts from around the world, as they are classifying this information, they send it to us, they feed it to us. It's why we call it a threat intelligence feed. And all of that information is constantly feeding into our tools. And so they are identifying what's bad, what's suspicious, and our tools pick it up and we're automatically protected as soon as it's available out there on the internet. So Cisco Talos is one way we get threat intelligence. Another tool that we have is called Anomaly, and that's what you're looking at right now. This globe here is one of the tools that Anomaly has. But what's bigger about Anomaly is that they have a separate collection of threat intelligence. And it can be more focused on the higher education community. Sometimes threat intelligence, which is more the threats that are more geared towards industry or government or military, things like that, aren't they're bad and we should know about them, but they're not as applicable to higher education and attacks that are focused there. And so Anomaly is the piece of our threat intelligence that helps us to bring that information in to all of our tools. We have also something called Stingernet, which is a honeypot. And the way I would describe a honeypot, what in the world's a honeypot? Well, you know how honey attracts the bears, it attracts the flies, it attracts things. And so basically what we do is we've joined with Duke University, who established Stingernet, and we've created 2 local honeypots. And it's just computers that we put out there on the internet, and we basically don't protect them. And so they're open to attack. And so when those machines are being attacked, it's okay because they can't do anything to damage anything. But we're finding out information that's out there. What kind of attacks are being used against that computer? What kind of exploits? What vulnerabilities are the bad actors are using? So that information feeds up into the Stingernet home, or the original source. And so anybody who's part of that network, they have their own honeypots out there. So all of that, all those flies that are getting caught in the honey are identified, they're brought up to the source, and then they're pushed back down into our security tools through Anomaly. Anomaly allows us to interface with those types of systems. So we're getting threat intelligence from a multitude of places. And that's very critical and very important to being able to protect us using our tools. Okay, so that information is automatically downloaded. But how do we know when something bad is happening? So we've got our tools, we've got the intelligence is downloaded, we've got all this visibility. How do we know when something bad is happening? So each tool at every layer has the ability to recognize threats, and they can take action depending on the severity of the threat. Another way we know when something bad is happening is another service that we have signed up for, which is the Center for Internet Security, CIS. They have a 24/7/365 SOC service. SOC is SOC, Security Operations Center. And so we have set up a monitor inside of our network that has visibility into all of this information, and they can see what's happening. They have their own set of security tools as well. And so they're watching constantly. They have folks hired to do that. And if they see something that's suspicious or worthy of an alert, they'll send us an email. And the higher the alert, the higher the escalation. So our folks are at work from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. They are receiving alerts in their email constantly, but there's some downtime when you're off of work. You're not going to be able to be on top of all this. But the CIS SOC team is. And so if there's something that's really bad, they'll send us a high priority notice. And if it's really bad, they'll call us to get our attention to focus on it immediately. Okay, so let's take a deeper dive into the tools. And I'm going to do this kind of at the layered approach. So let's talk about the network edge. And so Steve, if you can bring up our tool, for our firepower tool in the network edge. So firepower is a firewall. It's at the edge of our network. All of the traffic that comes in or goes out is examined through this tool. It's a next generation firewall. Some people are saying, what does that mean? So originally, the older firewalls were established, and they only looked kind of surface level at the traffic that was coming in and leaving. There are things called ports and protocols on the network, and that tool, the older firewalls, look at that level, and we could say only allow stuff that is like traditional web traffic to get to this web server. All right, but then over time, what happened is attackers said, oh, well, people are just looking at the port and the protocol, so we'll just write our bad programs on a port and a protocol that's accepted, and we'll just sneak it right on through. And so we had to get firewalls that were more intelligent. And so a new line of firewalls was developed, and those are called next generation firewalls. And those firewalls are capable of looking much deeper. They look at the traffic from all different perspectives. Our firepower box is receiving all of this information from this threat intelligence information, and it's looking at signatures of traffic. And so it's looking at reputation, it's looking at where it's coming from, it's looking at what does it look like. And based on those signatures, if there's some bad traffic that may be trying to come across a legitimate port and protocol, it's going to get blocked. And so all of that threat intelligence is feeding into our firepower box. So we're blocking as much of that bad traffic at the edge of our network as we can. So the really nice thing about this is that it protects anyone who's on our network, regardless of what layer of protection you have on your endpoint or anything else. If you're on our network, you're being protected by the firepower box, which sits at the edge of the network. So, Steve, you want to talk a little bit about what we're looking at here?
Yep.
And Barry, you can help as well. This is just a conversation.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so basically, we were talking earlier about the intel feeds, and over here we have our intelligence categories. And so we were talking about a Stinger feed, and right here in the past hour, we've had 1,000,000 hits on our particular off our honeypots, but also the conglomerate we do university. And so we can look at this and we can kind of see what's going on.
What is a hit, Steve?
An attempt, reach out to our infrastructure or a website that we have, an IP address that we have. They are trying to scan us to see if they can get in. They find a hole into our environment. But in this particular category here, you can see our action for this is to block. So it gives us a timestamp. Our action, it's either allow or block. The reason we have an IP block here. And initiator IP, this was the user or group that was actually trying to hit us or scan us. It gives us the country. Responder IP, well, that could have been somebody from the inside that it was trying to reach. And then here, it kind of tells us what ports it was trying to attempt on. And so, and it logs all of this. And so this is, from our side of it, but also from the other side, from the other users in the environment. They correlate this information, clean it up, and send it back to us through our integrator, and it comes in the firepower, and we're instantly protected from that threat.
So what you're showing us is really deep information, and I want to point out through this is we have visibility into this type of traffic and the level of visibility that we have, and that's not I don't want people to interpret that as, oh, look, they can see everything. Well, we're not interested and don't have time to look at all traffic. We have to be able to see the network traffic to protect everyone. And so we see it at this level, and these tools allow us to take a deep dive. If something happens and we get our attention focused on it, then we've got these tools to go in and say, hey, what's happening? Who's involved? And how do we stop this? So that's a really a good example of the firewall. And you had the dashboard up there, which basically, if you see all the options, there's so much you can see and so much you can do here. But I want to move on so we can get to the next section. And so, Barry, I'd ask that you would bring up ICE while I'm talking. So we talked about the network edge, and our firepower box is protecting everyone on our network from there. Now let's move to the internal network that we talked about a few moments ago, the internal layer. So internally, we have a program called Cisco Identity Services Engine, called ICE, I-S-E, ICE for short. And that's all about network access control. We control everyone or everything that connects to our network. No one gets onto the network without permission. And how you get permission? You either log in, or you're some kind of device that can't log in, like maybe a HVAC monitor or some type of appliance that just needs to plug in and play. It's like an Internet of Things device, kind of like your refrigerator. We have electronic meters or electricity meters, gas meters, HVAC meters, building automation systems, and things like that can't log in. But those have to be registered inside of our network access control system, or they can't get on. And so we very closely guard who actually gets onto our network using this. So you don't have to log in every time you get on the network. You don't see it, but your device is doing it in the background. So the first time you log in on wireless, you have to connect and you have to provide your username and your password. After that, that happens in the background. And the same thing happens on your computers in your offices. So when you log in, you're placed in a particular role because the system is going to know who you are based on your login. They're going to know if you're a faculty or staff or student. And then we're going to know if it's a computer that was bought by the university, which we will call a managed computer or a managed device, or whether you're using your own device, which we call BYOD, or bring your own device. And so if I show up with my laptop that I brought from home and I connect to our network and I log in, it's going to say, oh, it's Kevin. Oh, but that's not one of our laptops. That's his own. So if he had his own laptop, we would give him this level of access. But since it's or if he had a managed device, you'd have this level of access. But since it's his own device, we're going to give you this level of access. So I can still function. But we do that because of security concerns. We're not sure what's on unmanaged devices. We don't know what software is on there. And so there are certain things and certain elements on our network that we're going to protect against. So we're not going to allow access from a BYOD device to everything. So we can control what level of access you have based on who you are and what your device is, and that's really slick. Also, we have a tool called Rapid7, and that scans for known vulnerabilities on your computer. So when you try to log in with a university computer in your office or a wireless with your laptop or mobile device that was issued by the university, it's scanned to see if it's up to date or if it has any known vulnerabilities that have been identified out there that need to be patched. And we don't block folks from getting onto the network based on these vulnerabilities. But if we had a really bad one, we could do that. And so this tool is pivotal whenever it comes to allowing folks on the network. So if any of these tools sees a critical threat, if any of the tools that we're mentioning, like our Firepower box or Stealthwatch, which we'll talk about in a minute, if any of these security tools see something that's a critical threat, they can communicate with our network access control system. And if ICE is notified that this device is doing something that's really, really bad, or it's got some really bad stuff, then ICE will automatically quarantine that device and it will take it off the network immediately. That's without anybody having to know or anybody having to stop and take time to dig. Because if it's that bad, then we want it to stop. We want to contain that before it can escalate across our network. So we do have devices that get quarantined. And when they do, we know, and especially if it's in a particular location and someone's doing something that they really need to do, they'll call the help desk really quickly and let us know. We do not like to cause disruption. What we do like to do is protect the end user and to protect the university's data. So we only do that if it's a really, really critical or a bad piece of malware. Okay, so that's our network access control box, ICE. And now, so Barry, you want to kind of show us or tell us what we're looking at here?
Okay, so this is one of the integrations with ICE for endpoints. So we were talking earlier about the software that is loaded on managed machines that kind of keeps an eye out for any kind of malicious software. So it will actually kind of filter through all the stuff that would be, you know, high critical events, and it feeds that stuff into the dashboard. And like Kevin said, this is, you know, where it can make judgment calls based on you know, particular software or you know, it just for instance, so when a machine first comes on the network that's a managed machine, it gets scanned, and then ICE takes an inventory of all of the applications that it sees, and it will say, you know, I see you have, you know, maybe a really, really vulnerable piece of software. So if it came down to it and the university was under major attack, we could use ICE to search for that particular software and contain it from the network. That way it couldn't potentially cause problems in the event of a breach or something like that. So it's almost kind of like a DEFCON mode where you're looking at trying to isolate, you know, so that you don't have a spread of something worse. But ICE is really just a database of all of the endpoints that have connected to the network. It keeps a record of the MAC address of the host, and a host could be your cell phone, it could be a computer, it could be an IoT device like a web camera, something like that. Those kinds of things. It all filters in through this, and then the program kind of goes through and looks at your device and puts it on the network where we kind of have policies for these things to go. I don't know how in depth you want to go with this, Kevin. I mean,
that's good enough. So one thing that you just said just kind of reminded me. Another cool feature is your device is profiled. When your device connects to the network and it starts talking, then ICE can figure out what kind of computer you've got and what kind of operating system it is, or if it's a game system, or if it's, you know, what kind of device is it. And so it'll categorize it. And that's what we mean to do. We need to know what's on our network. We need to know what should be on our network, and we need to provide the right level of access. And so that's what ICE is all about. So here again, visibility into what's happening, and then control about what's happening when we need it. All right, so we're going to talk about Stealthwatch. This is also another piece at the internal network layer. So we just talked about ICE at the internal network layer. And then one other tool is Stealthwatch. We talked about east-west traffic going from one machine inside the network to another machine inside the network. Well, our firepower box, it's not positioned for that. So we currently do not have that in place. We will in our next round. We'll have some internal firewalling going on. We do have protections inside, and we do have firewalls, but we're going to ramp that up. What Stealthwatch does is it takes network information from every network switch that we have out there. So when you connect to either the wired or wireless network, that information that's going from your machine to the other machine is all watched by Stealthwatch. And it just sits back and it looks at all the packets and it says, okay, does this traffic look legit or does it look suspicious? And oh, by the way, we know which devices should be talking to each other. And if this particular device starts trying to talk to something it shouldn't, we're going to know that and we're going to alert on that. So it's basically just giving us more visibility into the network traffic that's happening inside of our network and giving us the ability to take action on anything that looks suspicious. And so a good example of that is we have some machines on our network recently that have tried to scan and try to connect to some of our network switches. Well, that's not good. That's not legit. And so we want to know about it. We want to stop it. And then we want to figure out why it's happening. Most of the time it's because of some type of software that was installed on the machine. Nobody's really trying to, but we don't know. But being able to see traffic that's going east-west inside our network is what Stealthwatch is all about. So Barry, what are you showing us here?
So this is kind of like a main dashboard for Stealthwatch. So these would be like the alarming hosts. And so if we click on a particular column, it shows in detail the information about the particular alarm that went off. So if we click on policy violation, it brings up those 43 events that are flagged by Stealthwatch. And it sometimes takes a minute because it's got quite a bit of data that it goes through. But it keeps the conversation from the host from the very start of the conversation to the end of the conversation, and then it basically takes that entire string of data and gives us information on it. So we can click on it on this particular host. So it shows that this is a host that's in Village. Shows me the IP address of the host.
Village is a apartment for students.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so
you can click on the events themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So this particular host got flagged for trying to connect to a bunch of different outbound servers on FTP, which is Unsecure File Transfer Protocol. So this one in particular is just alerting us that, this may be a problem, but, they give us the details so that we can dig into it and find out, more about the event.
And so we're not so much worried about student computers that are living in the dorms, but we do see the traffic. And so we can see everything, which means we have to kind of tune our alerts so that we're only looking at the things that are more pertinent to our business. So even though we see a lot of student traffic, and I will say this, if we have student traffic from residential facilities and it's really, really bad, that could endanger the student or their information or whatever, we will shut that down and notify them as a courtesy. So we are even providing that level of protection for our students. But it has to be really, really critical to do that. And as Barry said, we've got all of this information. We have to be selective about what we dig down into. But it's there, and we can take a look at it and find out what's going on. And again, Stealthwatch can talk with ICE, and if something really, really bad's happening, Stealthwatch will send it to ICE, and ICE will say, okay, we're going to shut that down immediately. And that's automation. And so there's a lot of efficiency there for us. Okay, so that's a good look at our internal network layer protection. And now we're going to take a look at our middle layer. So Steve, if you want to pull up Umbrella, and we're going to talk about, we talked about our middle layer, we talked about DNS and email. And so
I got a quick question for you.
Absolutely.
Good break. The viewing that we had of the globe that was showing all those spots, is that everything pertaining to UNCP or just threats around the globe, around the world in general?
Those are particular to UNCP.
Wow, that many at any given time?
Yes. That's why I said it's very eye-opening, James, and that's what we want people to understand. That is real time. That is what is happening. If we did not have any protection out there, we would be open to all of these threats.
And that's just one filter that we're showing, so it's not all active threats. So it's just a sampling.
Well, how does wow, that's one of those wows with an exclamation point, man. But how can one successfully prevent cyber attacks and cyber threats without having these type of layers and filters, and without somebody or a third party watching around the clock, like you said? Because after so many hours, we're going home. I'm pretty sure you guys get notifications, but with that is amazing, man. That many threats happening in real time.
Yeah, and that's a very good question. And that was the desired effect. Okay. And you're thinking, okay, if this is happening against UNCP, it's probably happening to me too. So what can I do to protect myself? And so we're going to go through that at the end. There's some things that you can do.
Okay, good.
Okay, so it's a great question, and we'll definitely get to that. And we're about to talk about one of those that's available to you at home. It's a tool called Umbrella, and the free version is called OpenDNS. And what it does, what Cisco Umbrella does, is when you are in your browser, or if you click on a link, that is a word link. www.uncp.edu makes sense to a human. Okay, that doesn't make sense to a computer. So it has to send that request. When you click on that or you enter that and press enter, it goes through a DNS server, domain name service. And it takes that information, translates it to an IP or an internet protocol address, which is a numeric address, which the internet machinery understands. Oh, okay, I see. You want to go to this IP address. Okay, cool. But here's the protection. Before your computer is sent to that destination address, OpenDNS is or Umbrella here, is connected to all of that threat intelligence. And so before it sends you, it says, is that safe? Is that a good site? Or is that bad? Is there ransomware on that site? Or is it legit? Okay, so that determination is made before your computer is allowed to go to any of those places. And it happens like that. Okay, and so that's what we call middle layer protection. So anytime you click on a link, or anytime you go anywhere from a computer on campus, you're given that layer of protection so that you cannot unknowingly visit a dangerous site. So that's a protection that's critical, and you can get that at home, and it's called OpenDNS.com. There's a free version of that, and you can just pull that up, OpenDNS.com, and that's something that you can install at your home to give you that same level of protection for free for the individual. There's no charge for that. Okay. Now, Umbrella does protect everyone that's on campus. And in addition, it will protect managed computers. Again, those are computers that are bought for employees or even for some students, depending on what program they're in. And they're managed by the university, and they have all these tools installed on them for protection. There's something called the Umbrella roaming client, which means if you take your laptop with you and you go anywhere in the world, when you click on a link, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to go back, check it out, and make sure it's safe. And so you carry that protection with you if you have a managed computer. Okay. So you want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing here, Steve?
Yep. So this is the Umbrella dashboard, and so this is basically our eyes to what's going on from inside our network to the outside. So anytime you make a request, you look up ESPN, Google, we filter through our proxies, our DNS proxies here, and so this allows us to see what's going on, the activity. And once again, we're not looking at it just to see what you're doing, but this helps us in troubleshooting if there was an outbreak or if we're seeing malicious trends on the network. And so here, if you see at the top, this is really from the last 24 hours, and it breaks it down on what we're seeing. Here it says malware, there were 321 requests blocked in the last 24 hours. If we had any botnet going on, it would tell us, and then any crypto mining, it tells us how many requests were blocked in that time. And then it kind of breaks down here how many we've seen. We've seen 35.8 million total requests in the last 24 hours. So that's a request to get to the internet just in 24 hours. And then it shows us the blocks that we're seeing. And then down here in the categories, it kind of tells us what's going on our network from a malware perspective, a phishing, which is real big, any type of crypto mining we got going on, and obviously command and control blocks, which is good. We hadn't had any in 24 hours, which is a good thing. And then it also shows us what type of apps are on our environment, what people are trying to use, anonymizers, P2P games, and then we can kind of control that access here. We can block stuff if we deem it malicious or circumventing our security tools.
We can also do
And
the opposite, right, Steve? So sometimes we've had some folks that have tried to go to websites
that's
and they
right.
get blocked, and you see that message come up on your screen that
That's
says,
right.
"Oh, you've been blocked," and they say, well, "Why am I being blocked from that?"
Yep.
That's when you contact the help desk and put in a ticket, and they get in contact with us, and we take a look at that. Sometimes, you know, we get a false positive. Sometimes a site that maybe Talos or Cisco is blocking for some particular reason um, may not be in particularly dangerous for us. And so we do have to take a close look at it to see why before we would say, no, nah, we're going to allow that to happen and override the system.
So one other thing you might want to touch on is that just because a site was okay yesterday does not mean it is okay today. So like say
What about the
most
Robinson?
that was what I was going to say. So the Robinsonian was breached and they didn't even know it. And we had some people from our marketing group that was actually trying to visit the site and they kept blocking and they said, you know, why are you blocking Robinsonian? And we started digging into it and we found out that somebody had hacked their site, put some malware in their site so that whenever you would visit it, it was actually installing malware on your box and you didn't even know it. So it saved us some headache on the back end for a little bit of discomfort up front.
And I think we also notified the Roxonian that they had malware on their site, and they were thankful that we let them know because they didn't even know it.
That's right.
And so that goes back to the Talos intelligence threat feed. And they say, hey, I don't care if you're the Robsonian or you're Google, that's bad stuff. And so we're going to let Umbrella know and it's going to block it.
That's
So,
right.
so that's how that works. We're not sitting around pulling levers and pushing buttons to turn things off. We don't want to do that. We do not want to cause disruption. We do want to provide protection, and sometimes that means disruption.
That's right. Yeah, the internet is just a dangerous place. So it's almost like, trying to protect ourselves from ourselves.
That's exactly right. And getting more dangerous every day. We do have a question in the chat. How do you handle students and faculty that travel abroad? So I would say if a faculty member is carrying or an employee is carrying their managed device, then they will carry the roaming client. They will have endpoint protection. And that would be layers of protection that would go with them. You still have to be a responsible individual, be very aware of what you're clicking on, the emails that you receive, are they phishing, are they legit, and being careful about the links. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a sec. Students, we're not managing devices. And so their device is only going to be as secure as whatever protection they've installed. And we'll give you a version of a free tool in just a moment. We'll talk about that you can take with you as a student or just an employee that on your personal device. So the student's email. And so we're about to talk about email. We'll shift to that, and then we'll shift off of Umbrella, talk about email. You do carry email protection wherever you go. Because before your email is delivered to you, it goes through not one, but two services. We have two security services. We have Microsoft 365, which is our official email platform. And then we have an additional layer, and that's called Cisco Cloud Email Security. And so we have two systems that are taking a look at each email that is sent from you or is received by you, which many of those never reach you because they're bad. They're phishing or they're identified as something that's bad and they're blocked. So we have to be really careful about what threshold we set for blocking emails because that can be very disruptive. So you may get some phishing emails, you may get some through, but the vast majority of them are being blocked on a daily basis. And in addition to each message being screened, You also have the benefit of something called safe links, and that's one of Microsoft's tools that we use. Anytime you have links inside of an email, and if you're adept at hovering your mouse over a link to discover, you're going to see what traditionally would be a very short address turn into something really long. That's because Microsoft Safe Links is taking that link and it's rewriting it so that when you do click on it, if you do click on it, it's going to go through their protection services and say, oh, this is not safe or this is safe. So you've got a layer of protection when you click on that link. And then Microsoft will say, oh, it's okay, go. Or, no, that's bad, and protect you from that. In addition, if you're on campus or if you've got the roaming client, after it goes through their security, then it's going to go through Umbrella and get the same check again. So a couple of layers of security there. So you do carry that email protection with you wherever you go because that's part of your email system. So I hope that answers the question that was in chat. So let's move on to the access layer and then we'll get to the endpoint layer. Again, the access layer, that's where your endpoint accesses the network. That's where you connect. That's where you connect to wireless or you connect to a wired port. So we use something that's called 802.1x authentication. That's a network term. That just means that the port that you connect to on the network, it has to have some security level set. Well, the way we used to do that is we would preset that security and say, this is for a staff computer, okay? And so only staff computers should plug into that port. And that's pretty good. But if that port is in an office and somebody walks in and the staff member's not there and they want to plug their computer in, well, now they've attached to the network into a more secure place because that port was statically set. So we've converted to something now, it's called 802.1x, which means when your computer plugs into a port, some conversation happens in the background with our network access control machine to say, okay, well, authenticate and let's see who you are. And we'll see what kind of device you have. And once that is determined, not only is your role on the network set, but information is sent back to that network edge access device, setting that layer or that level of security at that port. So it's basically automatically setting what network port you should be on instead of us having to preset that. And so that means that you can take your device and you can plug into any port on campus and you will get the same level of protection based on who you are and your role without us having to do anything. So that's very efficient for us on the back end, and it's very productive for our stakeholders so that they can go where they need to go and do what they need to do without contacting do it. Okay, so that's one thing we do. Another thing we do is called TrustSec by Cisco, and that uses something called a security group tag. And basically it's a marker, and it's a marker that's placed on every network packet that you send, and it's given a number. And if you're in security group 5, the network knows if you're supposed to be able to talk to devices in security group 6. And if you are, then the network sets it up so that you can talk. If you're not, then there's no way you're going to talk to that device. And that's how we guarantee that one endpoint can't talk to another endpoint directly on our network, which is very important to control network outbreaks of threats such as ransomware and other things like that. Because the first thing a device wants to do is connect to others around it and infect them. So that cannot happen because at our access layer, we segment the network. Okay. And then we'll go to the last piece, which is our endpoint layer. And the endpoint is your device. It is your computer at your desk. It's your laptop, your mobile device. And on managed computers, ones that we own, we place a couple of different agents or little pieces of software. It's called an agent. It's installed on that machine. It's called Cisco Advanced Malware, or AMP. And there's one called Microsoft Advanced Threat Protection, or Microsoft Defender. And so each computer that we own, those have those agents installed on them. And those agents sit there on the computer, and they're looking, they're watching everything that computer is doing. And if by some chance you took your computer somewhere off of our network and somehow something bad got on there, then that endpoint agent is the last line of defense. It's going to identify that, and if it sees it's bad, it's going to stop it from happening. It's going to quarantine the file, or it's going to do what it can do to contain that. And so if your device, after all of those other layers, you still get something on it, that's what the endpoint agent is there to do. Also, that endpoint agent will report back, and it'll say, hey, this device down here it's got something on it. And so that goes back into our system, goes back into our alerts, and it's just another way we can get visibility and provide protection all the way to that endpoint. So again, that's AMP and ATP. And again, that only protects managed computers. Okay. We've got about 6 minutes left. I want to give some home use example, and I want to go through a ransomware example. So an example of some ransomware issues that we've actually had on campus, how we knew it, and what we did about it. And so we've had probably 3 or 4 over the last year, I would say. And what was happening is we get alerts every day. There's a threat report that's sent. And so our folks took a look at the threat report, and they saw some ransomware activity, which was on the high alert end. And so immediately we sit down and we go to Umbrella and start digging in, trying to figure out what that is and what's going on. And at the same time, we shut that device down. We quarantine that device because we don't play around with ransomware. Any device that is trying to go anywhere that's ransomware related, if we know about it, we will stop that. And so that's what was happening. We saw that the device was reaching out to some ransomware sites. It didn't have the ransomware payload or the file on it, but because it was visiting websites that probably have malicious ads or something like that, then it was trying to then go to a ransomware site. Well, Umbrella saw that and stopped it. It blocked it. It protected the device. But whenever a device is reaching out repeatedly to a ransomware site, that's an issue. That's a cause for concern. And so we isolated that device and took it down. And then we communicate with our IT support services folks to say, hey, we've had to quarantine this end user device. We've disrupted this employee or faculty member. We need to deal with that as soon as we can. And so in those cases, we'll communicate with the end user, let them know what's going on, try to get a loaner device out to them, and then we're going to take the device that was doing that bad activity, and we're going to examine it, re-image it, clean it up, and then put it back in service. And we've had that, like I said, about 4 times over the past 12 months or so. None of the devices actually had the ransomware on it because they were being protected. But the end location where they were trying to go, we have a conversation about with the user as well. Say, what were your habits? Where were you trying to go? Were you browsing the internet? Blah, blah, blah. So we tried to identify the cause so we can prevent that from happening again. And I want to end up just, I mentioned tools for home use. So Barry, could you go to the OpenDNS, just go to opendns.com and just put that up on your screen. OpenDNS, again, is the free version of Umbrella. And you can install this on your home network so that when your computer and you're at home and you're typing URLs and going to all these addresses, you get that layer of protection, and you can automatically filter. So there it is, OpenDNS. It's free. So you can go to that site, and you're just a consumer. You're not going to get the enterprise level. You're going to get the one that's free for your home, just right there. Okay. So I would encourage you to do that today. Also, go to munet.com, IMMUNET, munet.com. And this is a free version of Cisco's AMP for home use. So this is for the individual. It's free, but it is also tied into Talis's threat intelligence. And you can get this for free and load it on your machine. And if you're using that and you're using the OpenDNS, you just added 2 very good layers of protection for your devices and for your home network. Also, if you log into BraveWeb, we do provide a Cisco AMP client there as well. So you could install that as free, since you're a student or faculty member, we have the license, you can install that version as well. All right, so are there any questions? James, you got any more comments or questions? Did we answer that original question that you had?
Yeah, man, this is crazy good. The endpoints, the AMP, and the other piece that you were talking about. What is, and I don't mean to compare, but how does that work in comparison to Norton Security or McAfee that comes a year with the free device that we purchased from Best Buy or Walmart or something like that? Is that comparison tools or just something totally different?
I would say it's comparative, and I'd ask for Barry and Steve's opinion on this, but they're going to have their own version of protection, and they're going to have their own threat intelligence. So I would say it's comparable. You can go out and look at reviews, look at Gartner and say, okay, which one's the best one, and see. But this one is really good and it's free. And so that's what most people want, something's really good and it's free.
So it's similar tools. It's not like you're missing out on something if you go with one or the other, possibly.
That's right.
So Gardner is kind of like a they do reviews
They're
of
third party.
yeah, and they're completely unbiased. They go through and they look at the different solutions that are out there, and they kind of rate them in a 4-quadrant solution, so that you can kind of see who's an innovator in this particular branch of in this case, antivirus, anti-malware, who's like on the leading edge, as far as the best, and then the guys that are maybe their idea is good but they're not quite there yet, and so you can kind of pick who you want based on what they've looked at, and so ATP, which is the Microsoft version, and AMP for endpoints, they're up there in the top right hand corner of that magic quadrant. CrowdStrike is another one that's really solid. So you could always check with Gartner and see which one they're looking at now.
Gotcha.
And if you have Microsoft, you're automatically going to have Defender, which is their version. So here again, you have the option of doing layers protection. You can add a couple of different ones to your device. Now you keep adding different ones. Some are more heavy, utilize the CPU more heavily, and they have more of a heavy footprint on your computer. So you can just keep that in mind. So hopefully we've opened some eyes to what the dangers are, that they're real, and what we do here at the university to provide as much protection as we can in a layered approach.
Is this something that every university does, or in the UNC system, or is this something that UNCP is particular to UNCP, or is the UNCP kind of like leading the way on some of this stuff? I guess, where does UNCP rank among its sister universities and college in cybersecurity? Because that thing is everywhere now. and with all of these issues that are happening?
Yeah, so that's a great setup question, James. I appreciate that. So the answer is yes. Every single institution in our system and any higher ed, they have to deal with the same thing. And each institution has to decide how they do that. Our approach has been very strategic. Instead of trying to just, piece and cobble together a solution of different security products, we try to reduce the overhead of trying to make all those pieces fit together and look for devices or a strategy that really work together. And a lot of these tools they've ended up being Cisco branded, but Stealthwatch was not Cisco when we were looking at them. We purchased it and Cisco bought them. OpenDNS was OpenDNS, and then Cisco bought them, and now it's Cisco Umbrella. And so some of the things were Cisco, some of the things were bought, were incorporated, but the benefit of having one of the institutions is one of the leading institutions on the network and in security is they're doing all of this integration on the back end. They're looking at how their products work together, so that you can get that efficiency. You can get the things like the automatic quarantine and all of these pieces of information that are talking to each other. And the automation that comes from that has really allowed us to be really efficient, really secure with fewer staff. And so we have a great system. I would say it ranks up there at the top of any of the institutions. So we've been fortunate to have avoided any significant breaches. That's not to say that it won't happen tomorrow, because there's always 0 day and 0 hour attacks that nobody is even aware of. And so what we've done is we've put up the most aggressive line of defense in multiple layers that we can, while providing as much access as we can. We have a unique situation, and all higher ed institutes do, because you've got it's not a corporation. You can't lock down every device and control every device. You can't do that. We have to build this environment that's flexible for academic use and for student use and for faculty and employee use. And so we're trying to balance all that with a few people and be as secure as we can. So I think that to answer your question, yeah, I think we're doing a really good job, and others in the system are beginning to use our model for where they're going. And it also depends on your size of an institution. We're much more sized for having centralized ability to do that. Some of your larger players, like your NC States and others, have their own schools, and so they're less centralized. And so maybe within that college, they have different security solutions at different levels. So, but in our size institution, we're seeing more people go in that direction.
It's awesome, man. Anybody else have any kind of questions, concerns? Okay, anything else, Kevin?
I thank everybody for joining, and I hope that it's been eye-opening and enlightening. I hope that that in some way this helps you to be less frustrated when you have disruption that's related to a security incident, and a little more understanding of the complexity behind what we're trying to do. So thank you for joining. And I hope that the other people go out and talk and let them know. Maybe they'll come back and take a look at the Tech Tuesday on the training website, and take a look at this one and learn more. And more people that know, it just heightens awareness of security, and especially the Anomaly globe. When you see that and you get that picture of what's really happening, that kind of drives it home. So appreciate everybody joining.